All right, so I hear you're going to start your very own food company or food brand. That's awesome. Today I've got about 6 tips or so, or things to consider when it comes to starting your company that will give you that very basic view of compliance and what you're going to need to put in place to ensure that you meet FDA or Health Canada requirements. This is just a snapshot. This is not all-encompassing at all, but it just gives you an idea. And if this is your first time here, I'm Brian. It's good to meet you. I've got over 15 years of experience in regulatory affairs, quality assurance in the foods, dietary supplements, natural health product space. And I'm here to help companies grow their business, but also navigate them through the FDA and Health Canada requirements. First thing we need to do is we need to figure out, well, what regulatory framework does your product actually fall under? Now, you may be saying to me, Brian, it's a food, right? I'm starting a food company. It's going to be a food. Great. However, I still want to ask this question because maybe you're using a novel ingredient, an innovative ingredient, an ingredient that no one's ever seen before, right? That could change the category of your product and it might fall into a different regulatory framework. Maybe you want to use a claim that you are so strong, that you so strongly believe in. However, if you were to do that, unfortunately, foods don't allow you to make that claim, and now you have to position your product differently as a result. So it's really important to really take the time to look at your formula, your marketing concept, the ingredients, its supply chain to see and determine or confirm, is this really a food? And how do we determine whether a product is a food or a dietary supplement or a natural health product, right? We look at the ingredients, we look at the claims, but we also look at the format, the labeling, how we expect the consumers to use it, right? How do consumers know the ingredients that are in the food, right? So these are things that are really important that we need to definitely clarify. Now, let's just say your product is a food. Well, even if that's the case, there are subsets within the food regulations. Maybe there's meat ingredients in there, right? Or meat derived, think collagen or whey protein, right? What if it's a fortified food? Maybe you're adding vitamins and minerals to add that extra boost of nutrition that your concept is so relying on, right? If it's a fortified food, there are some regulatory frameworks that have specifics on what that means or guiding principles that you have to follow, right? For example, you cannot, or at least it is highly discouraged for you to fortify things like candies, right? Like candies are meant for pleasure, for taste, but it wouldn't make sense to fortify that with medicinal ingredients or vitamins and minerals. It gets a lot more confusing to the consumer as to what it is. And FDA has actually put out guidelines when it comes to those things, and they just feel like those two don't go hand in hand. So typically their stance is not to fortify candies or something along those lines, but you don't know that until you really take the time to dive into it and to look at what category of regulations your product falls into. Number 2, you want to use a manufacturer that is registered with Health Canada or with FDA. And this is important because it's written in law that you need to do that. But more importantly, what Health Canada wants to do or what FDA wants to do is they want to know who to go to if there's a problem. Back in the day, companies didn't have to register. So if there was a problem, Health Canada would hear about it from their consumers, maybe someone got really sick, but then they're having a hard time tracking down the company or who to go to rectify this issue, or to at least tell them, hey, you've got a problem with your product, please don't release anything anymore. They just need to get to someone fast. And instead they lose time, right? They lose days, maybe several hours, because they can't find the right contact. So they're forcing people legally, by way of regulation and law, to register their facility with the government agency. And so you want to use a company that has done that. Now, note that when I say register, that just means submitting your information online and it's in a database, right? It doesn't necessarily mean approval. So keep that in mind. Ideally, you want to use a government approved facility if the government offers some sort of assurance or approval. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they will go in and inspect the facility and actually give you a certificate of compliance, depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the country, right? Other countries don't. They're like, we don't have the resources to inspect. The onus is on you. Go to the manufacturers that would go to a third party to get themselves inspected. Maybe they can go to a certification body, they can go get an outside consultant to do an inspection of them. That's third party, and then they would write a report and have that on file, and they can give that file to you to provide that extra assurance that they're manufacturing to code, to the standards, to the regulations. The third thing I want you to watch out for or ask for from your manufacturer is that your manufacturer should have a food safety plan. It needs a preventive control plan, and they're essentially the same thing: preventive control plan, food safety plan. I am overgeneralizing that, but they're similar. Manufacturer needs to have a food safety plan on site. This is just laying out what are all the ingredients, what are all the allergens, how do they make their stuff, what are the critical limits, and what are all the checks and balances, what their organizational structure is. It's kind of like a business plan, but from a food safety standpoint. It just lays everything out on paper so we all know what the expectations are, what to do if things go wrong, right? What is the current state of the company and how it complies to the regulations? What are some of the hazards of the food? All this stuff is laid out in the food safety plan. It's important for a company to actually have that. Don't get me wrong, it is not easy to write a food safety plan. It can be tedious. It can be difficult for a company that doesn't know what they're doing, if they don't have the right expertise, the right advisors on their staff. And some companies don't do it. Not because they don't want to, it's just not a priority. They've got other products to push out, but they need to have it. And it's by law. You need to have a preventive control plan in place. But just because it's in law, it doesn't mean that everyone does it, unfortunately. It's like putting your seatbelt on. Just because it's by law, not everyone puts their seatbelt on in their car, and people get away with it, right? So you want to watch out for those. You don't want to work with those types of companies. You want to work with ones that have that food safety plan that is updated, ready to go and in use. Now, to further extend this, and this brings me to the third point, yes, you're going to rely on your manufacturer to have a food safety plan. However, you want to make sure that you can read that food safety plan and understand it. So again, for you, it's important that you have an advisor on your side, a consultant, an expert to represent you and know how to read these documents, and then they can relay the key information to you, so that you know what risks are there. You can identify certain gaps. Maybe their food safety plan is a bit outdated. Maybe their food safety plan did not factor in your new product, your novel ingredient, your novel product into their library of foods that they make, since you just got there now. And now they need to update their food safety plan, but they can't get to it. So you create your own food safety plan that you and the manufacturer agree to. Right now, it can complement their food safety plan. It could address some of the gaps you identified, or it could live on its own within the scope of your company. But they're going to ensure that they comply with all the requirements that you've laid out in your food safety plan. You definitely got options here, but it's important for you to understand that you might need a food safety plan for your operation. And remember, from the eyes of the FDA, you're the owner. You're the owner of your company. It doesn't matter if you contract manufacturer out. Right? The responsibility of you complying to the regulations, you cannot contract that part out. All right? That's how they see you. So if there's a problem, they're knocking on your door, not your manufacturer's door. Next thing to keep in mind is that you can't rely on your contract manufacturer, right? You can't rely on all the organizations or companies that you've contracted out to. Right? You can contract out all your functions for all I care, right? But you can't rely on them 100% to ensure that your business complies with the regulations, right? Because at the end of the day, their interest is their first priority, right? And I've given this example before. If I'm a contract manufacturer, right, I want to keep my costs low. As a result, I'm not going to test everything, right? I'm going to try to find ways to skip testing or minimize the amount I have to test to keep my costs low. Right? Keep more profit to myself, right? Whereas for you, maybe you have a marketing campaign where you talk about how much testing you do or how high of quality your product is, right? And so you guys are now butting heads. You want them to do more testing. They don't want to do more testing. So what happens, right? And again, this is why I go back. You need to have someone to represent yourself to help you through that type of situation, and to figure out upfront, before anything's manufactured, what are the expectations from both parties. Another example, maybe you're using a designer to help you design your labels. For them, they're going to do whatever you tell them to do because as a client, they just want to make you happy, right? And they may know a little bit about the regulations, but not the nuances, right? Or they might not even bring it up at all because they just want to get this label out the door, get paid, and you're happy. They're happy. That's it. I don't think there's not necessarily bad intentions here, but my point is that at the end of the day, you can't rely on them, right? Because they have a different agenda, and the responsibility again falls on you to figure out what are the requirements for labeling. And so you need to make sure that your label meets that. And as a result, your label might not be as pretty as you want, right? You might not be able to say all the great things that you thought you could say, but at least you know that. And again, having an advisor to tell you those things up front at least gives you the information to make an informed decision. But the big takeaway here at this point is just to realize that you can't rely on the companies or the partnerships you've got and your contract manufacturer. You can't rely on them to help navigate you through all the laws and regulations and to meet those requirements. The next thing you need to consider when it comes to growing your business or starting your business is that you need to have a recall plan. Now, if you don't know what a recall plan is, let me give you an example. Okay, these are just some gloves here that I bought. Okay, and on the back it is a lot number, 6346. It's a lot number. So what this does is I know what batch this was, and I can tie this batch with that number to the manufacturing documents, maybe any testing this product had to undergo. I can see the documents tied to that. Maybe I can see which employees, the production employees, signed off on the manufacturing of this. Maybe there was a problem in the manufacturing process. There was a hiccup. I had to stop the lines, do my investigation, right? I would document that. That's all tied to this particular lot. Also, we know where this lot was shipped, ideally, right? You can see, okay, I shipped it to this particular Shoppers Drug Mart store in Yaletown, or I could see by this lot number it was shipped to Ontario or shipped to California, right? At this warehouse or that warehouse. And so what that's called when you're trying to figure out where it was shipped to, that's called traceability, right? You're tracing where lot 6346 was shipped to. Your recall plan is essentially that ability to trace where you shipped all your product out in the effort to bring it all back. So you hear about these product issues, these recalls, food recalls. And so there's two things you want to do. You want to contain it. You don't want to release anything, because if there's a problem with your product, you don't want to release more into the market, right? And then B, you want to bring all that stuff back. So if they found that this was the defective glove, right, that could maybe cause injury or wasn't protecting me the way it was designed to protect me. They realized that only this lot number 6346 was impacted, and so they got to recall it back. So you need to have a plan. How are you going to do that? How are you going to reach out to all the companies you shipped out to? Do you even know where all your product was shipped out? How do you currently track which warehouses your product goes out to? How about the consumers? Maybe you have an email list, right? Maybe you're a small enterprise, you're an online enterprise, you have an email list that you can reach out to. But whatever it is, you need a recall plan. You got to have the right contacts in place. You have to know what messaging to have. You have to know who to contact if you have a recall, such as what headquarters, what office, what agency office do you have to reach out to, who that person is, maybe an email address, hotline, or you have to have a plan, because let's just say it's a Saturday morning, you found out your product doesn't pass testing or it could actually hurt someone, and you need to stop selling and you need to recall everything. You need to contact the agency and give them all this information in that moment. And you don't have time to think about this and find things. So you just have a binder or maybe like a PDF file that lays it all out. That's your recall plan. It tells you exactly step by step what you need to do. And that means having a program in place that you can easily track all this information. I've worked with clients where they just ship product out. They don't even look at the lot number. They don't write down the lot numbers they shipped out or track where it went. They just say, okay, I need 6 cases of donuts, and then they just grab 6 cases of donuts and they ship it out. They don't look at the lot numbers. They don't trace it. They don't see which lots of donut that was and where it went. And as a result, they don't know where their stuff is. They can't find out where 6346 went. Right? Then what do you do? And this is why you need to have a recall plan. It's really important. And of course, you need a lot number on your label, right? So these are things you have to factor in as well. So a lot of people, when they're designing the labels, what are they looking at? They're looking at the claims, they're looking at the images, right? They're looking at the nutrition information, but you need your lot number, right? You need your shelf life date on there too. So something to consider, but the big one for now is just your recall plan. I went on a bit of a tangent there, but hopefully you guys get the idea. So I'm going to stop there for now. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. And I'll leave it there. I'll talk to you later. Cheers.